just turn the recording on. So what's going on?
Good morning.
What's happening?
Not a whole lot, man. It's cold in here today.
It's not too bad. I came in right around 5 this morning and fired the heat up, so it's not too bad today. It's
yeah.
I fired up the heat.
I'm not running any heat today.
I fired up the heat and went home and fixed breakfast. Ate my cornflakes.
Yeah, man.
But that's not much. I got a appointment to get my COVID vaccine on Saturday. That was big excitement.
Yeah?
Yeah, so I go in Saturday morning.
That's big news.
Yeah, for a little podunky.
Did you ever think you'd be so excited about a vaccine?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy to get going on that. Let's say, as excited as you can be for being stuck, but it's
yeah. Is your wife
glad to get that going.
Your wife has an appointment too?
Well, she does, but she goes to a different doctor, so hers isn't until like March, I don't think. But
oh man,
my group just I just got a invite, so at 9:20 on Saturday morning. So I'll be
good for you, Bill.
Yeah,
good.
I'll be glad. It's been slow rolling out here. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere, so they forget about us every once in a while.
I think it's slow rolling out. Yeah, I think it's slow rolling out everywhere. Yeah. It's real slow here.
But maybe it'll do better.
So
what's going on with you?
Let me see. Well, I was going back through a bunch of these notes, things that you and I were bouncing back and forth. We made those linker logs.
Yeah.
And gave them to my son for his birthday. And he loved it. He thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Well, it's kind of neat.
And just as you predicted, I mean, he built a box and he hid inside of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's a weird sort of stereotype, but it's absolutely true. There's millions of things that are real tiny scale building, like Legos and all. And that's very cool. You can make really intricate stuff. But to be able to do something
right
scale that you can get inside of, I mean, you won't make enough money in your lifetime to buy that many Legos.
A box you can climb inside of.
Yeah. It's just kind of the building big things. And that was all done from, I guess, an old Popular Mechanics or, one of those old magazine, the original design, the original idea. It was designed to be cut on a table saw. And
for the linker logs, you mean?
Yeah, the original one. I just found this thing, from 50 years ago.
Right.
So it's updated. The story, if you go to linkerlogs.com, that tells the story a little bit, and there's an article, it links to some illustrations from the original. And I just kind of updated.
I'll check it out. I didn't realize it went back that far.
Yeah. No, it's an old thing that kind of sat, and it was, it's, there's black and white illustrations you see in the old Popular Mechanics or Mechanics Illustrated or one of those kind of things. Home Handyman.
Bill, the thing I think that's funny about these is that as soon as my kids built something with them, it's now this sacred shrine that they don't want to take down.
Yeah.
And I keep trying to explain to them, like, it's okay. I mean, they do that with everything. They do it with Legos or Lincoln Logs or anything that they play with. They spend this time, invest this time in what they're doing. And they ended up with this thing that they're so proud of that the idea of taking it apart is this very difficult notion for them.
Yeah, they kind of become hoarders after a while. They get to the point where they want all the pieces, they want to build with it, and they don't want to do anything. They want it to stay together. We did.
Well, I mean, John immediately asked me if I could make him some more because he doesn't want to take this thing apart.
Yeah. It's a perpetual motion machine.
Why? So you can build another thing that you don't take apart and ask me for more?
Yeah.
This is great.
So how did the cut?
What logic?
Did the cutting go all right?
Yeah, it did. I had a vacuum lesson learned.
Okay.
So you recall the last time we talked about vacuum, I was saying that, I thought I had totally over-engineered this thing, put 4 motors on and, did 5 zones on the tabletop and all this crazy stuff. which really isn't as complicated as it sounds. But anyway, I did it. And then I realized that if you're holding something flat, just, 4x8 sheet of plywood, open 4 zones, mask off the 5th zone with some, 1/4 inch surfaced one side plywood, just scraps from job. I turn on one motor and it holds it perfectly flat, right? So I recently cut a new sign for the furniture school, and it had all this texturing. So it has used a big or a 1/2 inch ball nose, which is not real big, but 1/2 inch ball nose to carve this texture, background texture, and nothing ever pierced through the material. So that was the first major job that I used the new vacuum setup on. I cut a couple of small things, but nothing major. And I realized that when I turned on multiple motors, they were backfeeding. So one motor is becoming dominant, and it's pulling air backwards through the other system, or at least they're fighting each other. What it seemed like is I was getting this weird noise where the sound was kind of undulating. So I shut everything off, closed the manifold valves for 3 of the motors, opened 4 valves for the 4 zones on the tabletop, and turned on one motor, and it held this 4x8 sheet down perfectly, right? And so I thought, well, I spent way too much money on vacuum and way too much time thinking about this. Well, I've had a couple of jobs since then, and kind of cycled between 1 and 2 motors for cabinet parts, which are pretty, they're big parts.
Right.
So you don't really pierce the material that many times, right? You cut a lot of dados and little shelf pin holes and all that kind of stuff, but you're still working really with something that's sucked down to the tabletop. And the only thing that was being pierced were a couple of stretchers and nailers and that kind of stuff. When I cut the linker logs, I realized that it starts down on the 0-0 home position, goes over, and it goes down the x-axis, cutting small parts, and then it sort of works its way back and forth across the y-axis as it sort of zips along. When it got to the 2nd or 3rd row of linker log parts, I lost a little vacuum where the plywood sort of popped up off the table, and I used CDX. So that stuff is like a potato chip anyway.
Yeah.
If you just lay it down, it never stays flat.
Yep.
So I turned on another vacuum motor, opened the valve, turned on another vacuum motor, and it sucked down flat. So it went a couple of more rows, and it did it again. And I realized that as I'm piercing, if you're cutting a lot of small parts, you do need the additional vacuum flow. So I turned on a 3rd motor, opened the valve, turned on a 3rd motor, and it sucked down again. Well, it got down to those last 2 rows, and it did it yet again. I turned on the 4th vacuum motor, and it sucked the waste material back down, and all the little parts kind of seated. So as you vacuum motors on a 5x10 table, if you're cutting a lot of small parts and piercing the material, if you're going all the way down into the spoil board, you lose vacuum. And even with all 4 motors running on 4 open zones, 1 zone masked off, the long zone that I have masked off, with that many holes in the material, even 4 motors didn't have a ton of vacuum. I could just walk up and just pull the parts off, but they did hold. So I would not be able to do heavy machining like that, right? If I had to go back and cut holes or dados or anything in those parts, it would not work. It would throw those parts.
Yeah.
So
One of the issues is once it pops, sawdust and crap's getting underneath that part. And it may look like it's pulling down, but it's still got a little bit to keep it from, it's not pulled all the way down. It's pulled down-ish.
Right.
But it's never, once it pops and the pieces all start jiggling a little bit, it's
right.
It's troublesome for sure. So maybe the thing to
What,
do is to,
you know, Bill, I've told you, yeah, go ahead.
I think, well, maybe the thing to do is to put a vacuum sensor on, on the inlet somewhere. And
Right.
whenever the vacuum, in theory, there's lots of vacuum when you first start, and it decreases as the panels get cut. So maybe you figure out what that threshold is, and have it automatically kick the second motor in and the third motor and whatever, as that vacuum gets to the point where it's getting weaker and weaker. And if you can catch it before it makes the pop, with flat material, it's not nearly the
right.
But if you got stuff, and also depending on, you want to have it you want it crown this way rather than sort of dead bug. You want to have it so that it pulls down rather than trying to pull those ends down. But it's
Well,
once you
I tend to avoid the dead bug. I put it crown up.
Yeah, that's
and that way when I turn on that first vacuum motor, it just sucks down flat. And it's what I was going to say was, I shared with you that my experience with vacuum prior to this was with a great big industrial pump, and it was just all on or all off. There was no sequential you couldn't increase or decrease the vacuum, you just turned it on. So I never had a reason to understand it in that way, and I don't know, that was a really big, expensive unit, and it's conceivable that it did something along those lines, like, as it pulled more vacuum, or as it lost vacuum, it increased the pull, or so. I'm not exactly sure, but that unit, that machine would hold a whole sheet of small parts really well, except for the home position, which I think was just a weak point in the plenum. It was far away from the inlet tubes. It was, I don't know exactly. Maybe there was a gasket problem to the spoil board. I'm not exactly sure, but that front corner on that machine, on that particular setup, would always lose vacuum if it was smaller than about 2 feet square, right? 2 feet in one direction. It would just throw it. But otherwise, it held all kinds of small parts all over the table just fine. And I don't know if it was just increasing the pull as it lost vacuum or something. I don't know. But this system is all independent motors and 5 independent zones. So I think, maybe I'll get sophisticated enough at some point to have them cycle on automatically. But for now, they're just wired to these switches. So I just need to watch it. If I'm cutting anything with lots of small parts, I need to just cycle a motor on, it's just kind of pay attention and say, okay, I've got, it looks to be about 12 inches, roughly 12 inches from the edge was about where the first thing popped. So if you go, every 12 inches, you cycle another motor on ahead of it popping, maybe I could control it in that way, which is just a little more active, but that's not a hard task.
Yeah, and you won't cut a whole lot. I mean, those pieces, the small pieces like this big, I mean, they're not very big. That's not like something you do every day.
No, I don't cut a ton of small parts like that every day. So
that's a good thing to learn, though, to sort of cycle that. So you're not, burning electricity and burning up motors and all that stuff for no need. In the beginning, you don't need them. But if you can catch it before it pops, then then I think you'll get way better vacuum through the whole thing. It's just knowing whether there's, because you can make a pretty big hole. It's sort of like the air leak around your front door. It doesn't seem like it's much of an air leak around there. But if you sort of calculate it out, it's like somebody shot a cannonball through your house. Because that little bit, that big perimeter, very narrow, is the same as sort of a big hole. You're cutting a 1/4 inch bit, around all those little parts. You made a pretty big hole in that for air to bleed in.
Man, so speaking of big holes, another lesson learned. We're doing this renovation on the front end of our building. We're gonna finish all that stuff out.
Yeah.
With the bench room and all that. And Scott and I were cleaning out a bunch of stuff out of the front room, and we really don't have a lot of reason to be up there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of been a storage hold since we bought the building. Um, there is a penetration in the roof with a stovepipe coming down
Wow.
that I honestly didn't think about. I just didn't apply much thought to it. I knew it was there. When we inspected the roof, it's capped and it's flashed and it's all that stuff. So I said, well, there's a hole in the roof. And then I didn't think about it after that. Man, we were moving a bunch of stuff out of the front room the other day. The wind was blowing and it just felt like an air conditioner vent just blowing straight down into the building, just full throttle.
Dark.
It was so cold.
Good.
Oh my God, it was awful. So we climbed up on a ladder and taped it off, put a bag around it, and taped it off, and we promptly started strategizing about how to plug that hole permanently.
Yeah.
I mean, it's trouble because it's a built-up roof with a big penetration in the hole, in the roof. So it's a hole, so you can't really patch it effectively. We just need to create some kind of, I don't know, some kind of something where the air can't come in, it can only go out.
Blow it full of foam, expand in foam, and cap the bottom off.
Could do that for sure. So yeah, I mean, it's lessons learned.
Yeah.
Pretty awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool, man.
So tell me about you. What's going on in your world?
Oh, so I was pretty excited about this, getting this appointment for the vaccine. That's sort of the big excitement. But I learned a little bit the other day that I should have known. So, the shelter stuff, you're involved in that. I'm working with the House of Mercy folks up in New York, up in Rochester. And they got a guy up there with the ShopBot that's cutting a set of parts for them. And he doesn't use VCarve. I'm not sure what he uses, but he wanted the files in DXF. So I could just export out VCarve. So I exported a set of files for him, and I looked at the first couple of them, and they looked great. So I just exported the whole thing, one file at a time, and sent it to him. And there's a couple of parts like the end walls that are mirror images, left and right. They're exactly the same, except they're mirrored. So, he looked at the left wall in the back and saw the holes and everything. And then he looked at the right wall in the back, and it looked different. The perimeter was the same, but it was missing some stuff. They let me know, and I've looked at there. I couldn't figure out why it was missing stuff on different layers. And it turns out that if you're exporting out of VCarve in something like DXF, and you have anything selected in your drawing, that's all it exports. It doesn't export all the other stuff. If there's nothing selected, it exports everything. Which is, it makes sense in some ways, in lots of ways. If you just want to do one part of it, you just select it and export it. But it just didn't register with me. And I use that associate toolpath with a layer. So a lot of times it'll just be a layer on. If I get any active toolpath, it automatically selects everything on that layer and selects it for toolpath. So everything.
You know what I've started doing, Bill, is because of just the volume of work we did this past year, all that stuff I've been sharing online and all of that. We were going 10 to 12 hour days there for a while, and I had so many things to remember and manage in my workflow, not just on the machine, but just at a business level and all that stuff. I started just saving, I would do the drawing, and instead of like nesting multiple sheets and that kind of thing, I started drawing everything as an individual file. And then I would just simply save that, I would assign layers. But I would limit the whole thing to one sheet so that if I got interrupted, I didn't have to come back and think. I could open that one set of things, and it would be, let's say it was a cabinet base, sheet of cabinet base sides, which has, a number of toolpaths on it. I would just draw each component individually, assign that to a layer, When I went to toolpath it, I would select that layer and save that as an individual file. And it creates kind of a big library of files, but if you have, if you just create a folder for that particular job, and then inside of that, you just label each thing in a really clear and concise way. So it was like, I had the name of the company that I was working for and the room that set of, whatever furniture or cabinets was going into as the folder inside that file. And then when you open that folder, it would say, like console table. You'd open that up and it would be table legs. And then, table leg dados, table leg joint, whatever it was that needed to go in there. I just saved them all as individuals. And that way, after getting lost a couple of times with, folks coming in or calling or, Scott needing me to help him move something or whatever, and coming back to it, I just, with multiple sheets nested and, a bunch of different stuff associated with toolpath and all that kind of thing. I got lost a couple of times, couldn't, it's just too much stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I started saving everything as an individual file, and you can just go right back to it. So I don't know if that's a good way to do it. I guess that's my new bad habit, but it works, and I don't have any issues.
I mean, that's the system. Find a system that works for you.
Yeah.
And I don't do quite that much, but I do everything with one bit as a separate file. I don't do any of those automatic, this bit change.
I don't either. I don't do any of that. So if I have to change a bit, I pull that file up and it knows that it's that bit.
Yeah. And the file has whatever the bit is in the name. What I do, it'll VBit or whatever. But,
right.
But I do take, like if I have a bunch of stuff that's cutting with a 1/4 inch bit, I don't divide it all out. So if I have like dimples for screw holes and then some pockets and then some whatever, they're all in one file, but they're all one bit. So it runs from start to finish for a sheet. And then it goes, and if I need to do the bit, I have to open another, I close that and open another file. And that seems.
You know what else? What else has been working really well for me was that bit that you turned me on to that Amana put out, that 1/4 inch Impresta.
The 3 flute?
Whatever, high speed 3 flute straight bit. Man, I've eliminated bit changes.
I'll bet.
Because you can run it 800 inches per minute. I mean, and I don't run it at 3/4 depth just because I don't want to break them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll run it, I'll depending on what I'm doing, I'll run it, half the depth of the material or something in 2 passes.
Okay.
But I'm running it at 800 inches per minute, which is moving.
Nice.
18,000 RPMs at 800 inches per minute. That's cooking. And so what I was using a lot of 3/8 inch bits for, I'm now just leaving that in there more of the time. It's not the only bit, obviously that I'm using, but I can do shelf pin holes and rabbets and dados and things like that with that one bit.
Cool. I'll have to get them.
Just by oh man, I love it.
I've had good luck with.
I bought a couple of them, and the carbide is good. They're lasting a long time. It's got a 1/2 inch shank, so it's able to reduce that vibration, and it sort of tapers down to the straight part of the cut, which is not, it's not real long.
Well, you cut through.
But for 3/4 inch material, it's just dead on.
Cool, man. I'll try that for sure.
Yeah.
You call it the nesting bit?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know what that means exactly, but it's good marketing. I don't know, it'll nest well, whatever that means for a bit.
Well, excellent. Excellent.
Well, cool, Bill. Well, let's catch up in a couple of days. Let's do this again.
Yeah, we'll find out. Maybe I will have been vaccinated by then.
Good stuff. I'm hoping mine's not too far behind. I mean, they keep talking like they're going to ramp all this stuff up faster and faster, but
it's not a very steep.
Sure. Yep.
All right, man.
Have a good day, Bill.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.